Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. Hopefully you've all had a wonderful Wednesday, as I didn't release a daily cryptocurrency market video earlier, and I do like to cover the markets daily with you guys. I thought we'd release one later on in the evening. As we've had such significant data today, we're going to look at what the data was and what it potentially means for the markets. Now, I think people are quite confused that the markets didn't rally off the back end of this, but the markets have been pretty aggressively rallying to the upside up until this point. And I actually think that a lot of this CPI data has already been priced in. And we'll look at Bitcoin. We'll look at a couple of other markets. Let's get into it, guys. Let's get into what we had today. We had the CPI. We had covered this previously, and it has been our view that CPI and inflation is coming down, certainly for the month of March. And ultimately, you guys know that we took a position back in the markets at the start of the year and have been doing rather well off of it and looking for further upside. We've got a plan set out. We've got an inverse head and shoulders target that gives us a 35K prediction for Bitcoin on a non-log scale. On a log scale, it's slightly higher. And ultimately, we think that that is where you're going, and our position reflects that. But there hasn't been much movement on this lower print. The previous print was 6, and we have a whole percentage point drop. I think this is the largest drop since 2021 in inflation. And you can see we've gone from 6 all the way down to 5. So we know what's driven Bitcoin, just to take our immediate draw off. It's been rate hikes. We've had rate hikes as a result of inflation. We've been consistently saying, really, since the start of this year, that there's this kind of macro shift taking place. And we actually said that we had confirmation of that in the yield market, which actually hasn't done too badly off of this. But we do think that the Fed is done hiking. They may do a 25 basis points after the non-farm payroll that we got. 25 basis points, I think, had something like a 70% probability. I think it's come down a little bit more. But even if they do 25, guys, we think the macro is, or the kind of, the macro has changed. And ultimately, this is supporting the risk markets. And obviously, we've had an acceleration of that with what we saw with Silicon Valley Bank and some of the other banking issues that we've seen in the US. Not only has Bitcoin got a bid, but gold has, and a number of other assets. So today's largely been a nothing burger. However, it confirms the general trend that we think we're now in, which is a shift in the macro, and ultimately we have the technicals to support Bitcoin continuing to go to the upside. CPI, again, came out significantly lower. It's going to be interesting to see how this affects everything. I think the immediate effect isn't there just because Bitcoin's done so much over a short period of time. However, people might have been wondering, well, why is Bitcoin rallying here? Well, the data that you got today is why these big funds and institutions and big money, they look at these things beforehand. Me as an analyzer have looked at this beforehand. So has my group. For those of you that are interested, I do have a Patreon. There's a link in the description. But ultimately, we've already positioned for this. We had a hunch. You never know with markets necessarily, and you should always be humble before them, that this was going to be the case, and ultimately it's confirmed our narrative. So just because there's not a lot of movement here with such significant news, or you deem it to be significant, it's because a lot of that's been priced in. But what it more importantly is doing is confirming our overall trend for things. And that is that we think things are to the upside. Remember, this is very key price point for Bitcoin. And ultimately, it's naturally going to pause here. Not only is it key in this recent price history, it's key. It's a very significant level. So I do actually think, on that note, that maybe you are looking at a slight pullback before you do push on to 25K. Remember, we've got a 25K target. We think markets are largely involved in this sort of 5-way of imports. If you guys didn't see yesterday's video, by the way, it's well worth a watch because I talk about the Dow theory and actually how this supports, and we looked at a little bit of Elliott wave theory, which I think has a lot of credibility on the bigger time frames. I just think small time frame, it doesn't really predict much. It's kind of like the RSI, it might give general signals, but it certainly doesn't give you trade entries and exits. So you may get a bit of a pause here for Bitcoin, as it's such a significant level. This 30K especially, it's a nice big round number. So you may get something like this. in a similar fashion to potentially what gold's done. Remember, we did use gold as a lead indicator for Bitcoin. And we said, actually, kind of thought Bitcoin was going to do the same thing that gold did. And what I was referring to is this period of stagnation, or this kind of grinding higher, the market's pointing in which way it wants to go. In this instance anyway, and then you got this pop out the top. You know, we did say this. So maybe Bitcoin's on it's had this rally, and maybe it might want a bit of an anticlimax, and then we go to the upside. On some different news, I've got a very mixed view of Micheal Saylor. Not a massive fan of the guy whatsoever. I think MicroStrategy is funny. I think it's just Bitcoin, basically. That's what it's become. We did see, and we did talk about this on the channel, how we saw the Bank of England and Fidelity take positions in MicroStrategy. Now, they're only doing that for Bitcoin exposure. You know, this also ties in with our kind of thesis on Grayscale's GBTC and how this is propelling the market. Look, you're noticing GBTC, it's obviously the Bitcoin price, pulling off a bit. You know, I think maybe you'll have a period of stall, anticlimax, and then, you know, what today's really done is proven more so and given us more confidence in the macro, or not really macro, but sort of midterm trend that we think Bitcoin's on, which is to the upside. In regards to MicroStrategy, isn't it interesting how these guys are now back in profits for the first time for their Bitcoin? Very interesting. You know, is Micheal Saylor going to go down as an absolute hero? I don't know. I'm certainly not a Bitcoin maximalist, but I do think, given everything that's happened, and certainly there's a lot of credibility being given to it, how it's caught a bid with gold on the back end of this kind of hashtag banking crisis. I do think Bitcoin very much has its place, but is Micheal Saylor going to be proven to be an absolute genius? Who knows? You've got to give credit where it's due for sticking to his convictions. I'm not sure that he's the best kind of guy to listen to in terms of finance, but his Bitcoin bid is now in the green. I found that very, very interesting, and maybe is some sort of a sentiment check in regards to how the market and the kind of shift is taking place. So that's really all I've got for you guys. It was just a short and sweet one. I wanted to get something out as I didn't release a video this morning. However, I'll be doing a video tomorrow. As usual, we've got and we wrapped. The reason I didn't make today's video is because I was doing a couple of interviews that we'll release for you later on. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. If you have enjoyed this content, a like is always appreciated. So as a comment, make sure to smash that subscribe button. And if you haven't checked out my Patreon, please do so. I believe it's well worth the money paid for it. All I've got for you in this video, guys. See you in the next one.